Hey everyone, I'm Jennifer Perry and welcome to the Perry Perspective. Today I'm going to be talking about China. Now, I know all the mainstream media is covering all the argy-bargy around the barley tariffs and the beef exports, and we're probably going to hear about wine and the dairy industry soon. But I want to cover probably something that's more of what's been going on for, well, more than a decade, and give you a little bit more of an insight into the tentacles of what's really happening, especially with our regional neighbours. So the South China Sea is crucial to the Belt and Road Initiative for China, which is their blueprint to take over world economies. Now, I'm just going to show you a quick video. All the videos I show, I'll put the link in the comments below. So this video was actually first done in February 2017. So it's a couple of years old now, but it's more and more relevant now as time goes on. It's a very good video and it shows the build-up of the 6 military bases that China has been doing. So let's just jump.
This is Fiery Cross Island. It's a little more than 1 square mile in size, and it's home to a Chinese military base. There's a 10,000-foot airstrip, an advanced radar station, a missile defense system, and about 200 troops. But the strangest thing about Fiery Cross Island is that 2 years ago, it didn't exist. And neither did the 6 other Chinese military bases that have been built on man-made islands in the South China Sea. If you look at this satellite image from 2014, you can see huge Chinese ships collecting around remote reefs in the Spratly Islands, an archipelago in the South China Sea. In this image, these ships are rapidly pumping sand and rock up onto the reef. They're building islands. And less than a year later, the Chinese had seaports, air bases, and buildings on their new island, and the world had taken notice.
We continue our look this morning at what China does not want you to see. The superpower is reclaiming land
in 7 spots in the South China Sea,
adding on average more than 3.5 acres every day.
See, with these islands, China's trying to lay claim to one of the most important areas of ocean in the world, the South China Sea. The South China Sea is incredibly rich in natural resources. 11 billion barrels of oil, 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, and 10% of the world's fisheries. Most importantly though, 30% of the world's shipping trade flows through here, to the booming population centers and economic markets of Southeast Asia. It's an extremely important body of water, and right now 5 countries lay claim to some part of it. Now, most countries base their claim off the UN Law of the Seas, which says a country's territorial waters extend 200 miles off their shore, an area called the Exclusive Economic Zone, or EEZ. Countries have exclusive rights to all the resources and trade in their EEZ. It's their sovereign territory. So for example, any oil that's found within 200 miles off the coast of Vietnam belongs exclusively to Vietnam. But any area that isn't in an EEZ is regarded as international waters, and it falls under UN maritime law, which means everybody shares it. Now, every country in the South China Sea region uses this 200-mile EEZ threshold to determine its claims. All except China. China argues they have a historical claim to the South China Sea, dating back to naval expeditions in the 15th century. And they mark it using a really confusing border called the 9-dash line. Following World War II, Japan, who had dominated the entire region, lost all control of its surrounding seas. China used the moment to claim the South China Sea by drawing this imprecise line on the map that encompassed 90% of the South China Sea. It became known as the 9-dash line. And when the UN established the 200-mile EEZ in 1973, China stuck to its own line, refusing to clarify its boundaries and ignoring claims by other countries. Now that brings us to the Spratly Islands. It's a remote, barely inhabited cluster of islands currently claimed by China, Vietnam, the Philippines, and Malaysia. The Spratlys are both geographically and symbolically at the heart of the South China Sea. That's because any country that can claim the Spratly Islands can extend their EEZs to include them, and gain exclusive rights to the surrounding territory. But it's really hard to legitimately claim uninhabited piles of sand, so a few nations have built small buildings and ports on their claimed islands, and even stuck a few people there. But China believes all of the Spratly Islands belong to them, which brings us back to why they're building islands there.
So did you hear them say that China believe they have an historical claim due to their 15th century naval expeditions? That's pretty frightening, especially when I alert you to something I found in Clive Hamilton's book. Now, this is a very good read. He goes through a lot of what's been happening in Australia with relation to China. But one of the things I want to actually talk to you about is the fact that they use false history to make a future claim on Australia. So this is the opening remarks by the Chinese President Hu Jintao to the Australian Parliament back in October 2003. He said, "The Chinese people have all along cherished amicable feelings about the Australian people. Back in the 1420s, the expeditionary fleets of Chinese Ming dynasty reached Australian shores. For centuries, the Chinese sailed across the vast seas and settled down in what they called Southern Land, or today's Australia." So that's nearly 2 decades ago, where China was laying the seeds for the fact that they believe that they can claim Australia as their own, which they have done with other countries. So let's just have a look at about what's been happening around our region with our neighbours. We've seen China sink a Vietnamese fishing boat with 8 people on board because now this is just in the last couple of months. They've also been harassing the Japanese with their fishing boats. And in India, they actually sent in helicopters. This is all while the COVID-19 pandemic's going on. This is on the Kashmir border. And then in New Zealand, Cardinal Sin, they actually mentioned Taiwan. And then they pressured the EU to change their report with regard to the COVID-19. So China is definitely bullying people. And while all of this is going on in Hong Kong, they arrest all these pro-democracy figures. So they are on the march. They are bullying everybody. They are pushing back, claiming territory that doesn't belong to them. And Australia is in their sights as well, make no mistake about it. This one wasn't since COVID. This one was back in December, and this is Indonesia. And what you're going to hear is an audio of 2 Coast Guards are radioing each other, and again, more argy-bargy. But read or listen to what the Chinese Coast Guard ship says.
The island in South China Sea and the adjacent waters, and enjoys sovereign rights and jurisdiction in the relevant waters, as well as the seabed and subsoil.
I order you to leave this territory. I order you to leave this territory.
So there's a few tense moments for a lot of countries around our region. We're very lucky that even as far back as 2015, while Obama was still the president, America brings their troops in and they actually challenge China, who claim sovereignty to those waters. And we want America to keep doing that. I'm just going to move to one that's, well, probably a little more lighthearted, but not for the bears. Have you ever heard of panda diplomacy?
Have you heard of it? It's a type of diplomacy used exclusively by China. China is the sole owner of every single panda on planet Earth. It's the only place where they exist naturally, and they sort of ship out pandas to different places across the globe as a treat to regimes around the world in exchange for political and economic points. Oh, they want sanctions down? Have a panda. That's exactly what happened here in Canada when Prime Minister Stephen Harper secured the 2 pandas, Da Mao and R Shun.
So those bears were meant to stay for 5 years. But just like what they did with America, when America displeased China a couple of years back when they were looking into the Huawei saga, the Sacramento Zoo had to send their pandas back.
Justin Trudeau, just a few days ago, mentioned Taiwan. He thanked them for their shipment of masks. And what do you know? Now the pandas are officially going back to China.
So it seems China is taking full advantage of everyone else's distraction and everyone else's weakness right now with this virus. Now, I have no doubt that it came from the Virology Institute. And in fact, I really would highly recommend you jump across to the Right On website. They've done a 5-part series on China and the coronavirus. The team over there are fantastic. They do some great research. Just by way of disclosure, I volunteer for them as well and help them out in different ways. The Right On website has also done a great article with regard to Dan Andrews and the Belton Road quite a while back, and that's worth revisiting. There's so much to do with China. I haven't even begun to talk about the Confucius centres, which are extremely concerning here in Australia. That's what I wanted to do today, was just to give you the overall view of the region. And it's really important that we stand firm, we don't weaken. We need to have diplomacy, which I believe Scott Morrison is trying to do, because we do need our exports with China. The other thing that I will say is China is not letting on how much they're hurting. And we know that if we stop exports to China, that's a whole lot of beef that China's not getting. We also know that China has just slaughtered millions of pigs, and their food supply is going to dry up. But we understand that China will sacrifice millions of people, because they have done it before, and let them die of starvation to achieve their global goals. Please keep praying for the Chinese people. They live in a totalitarian regime who has no care for them whatsoever. And my heart goes out to where they're going to be over the next 5 years. Stay true, wave the Australian flag, support our Prime Minister and all of our people in Parliament who are working so hard at the moment to help us get our economy back and keep us safe. Thanks for listening. Talk soon.